Hey there, welcome to episode 107 of the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program. I'm your host, managing director of the Nevada nonprofit public charity known as Innovate for Vegas Foundation, Dan Hugo. We're recording this at 2:55 p.m. on Tuesday, March 4th, the 4th of March, 2025. Today's episode, Let's Get Civical. A little shout out to Olivia Newton-John, if anybody knows their musical history. If not, that's okay too. Civics, civic activity, civic volunteerism, civil service, being a part of what's going on around you. So that's what we're going to talk about today. The Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program is the official audio program of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation. As I suggested, we are a Nevada nonprofit corporation incorporated in June 2022. June 16th, in fact. Just looked at that the other day. We became a 501c3 public charity in October, although that is retroactive to the date of our formation, thus June 16th, 2022. We are a tax-deductible donation possibility for your near term. We don't really ask for money, but it's always there, that donate button on our website, which we'll get to in a moment. I am the managing director. The managing director is a director that does things. Many people go for the executive director title. Managing director is usually a director doing day-to-day activities. Executive director is more special projects or anyway. Managing director. You can check it on LinkedIn. Hopefully wherever you found this audio program, you are able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes and a couple of links. There are only 2 links in addition to the usual 4 that I say every week. 2 links for today's episode, a total of 6. I will read to you the summary and then we can get into it. This episode should not be very long, but we'll find out. The summary of today's episode is, these are interesting times, no doubt about it. And while there is a lot of news to follow in the world, one of our core tenets is to focus on community elevation, thinking and acting locally through ideation, innovation, and implementation. But what does that really mean? That is from our purpose statement. Our purpose is to enable and encourage ideation, innovation, and implementation to make our communities better. Purposely vague. Not everything is code. We are formerly Code for Vegas. Formerly Code for Vegas Foundation, which in itself was a reboot of what was formerly Code for Vegas, which used to be part of Code for America. No longer. I think Code for Vegas was a part of Code for America before there was an actual brigade program, but it was essentially a brigade. If you're familiar, now you know. The links for today's episode, the usual, innovateforvegas.org, innovate F-O-R, innovateforvegas, .org. That's our homepage, some basic details about some of our initiatives, our calendar for our weekly initiative meetup and our weekly office hours. If you're listening to this before the end of March 2025, pardon me, do know that we have lightened up the schedule through the end of March. So it's like alternating weeks for the 2 meetups, but after the end of March, we'll go back to every week. So check the calendar on our homepage, the gatherings calendar. As I'm speaking at this moment, we have 2 virtual events. They'll always be advertised there, I suppose you could say. There's also a donate button on that page, but we don't have to harp on that too much. Project ACT.info. ACT stands for Autonomous Cohort Transformation. Back when Code for America existed and we formed our own independent 501c3 public charity, there were grumblings from others that they wanted to also consider becoming independent of Code for America, perhaps. So we initially started talking about how to help other organizations become independent. They could become autonomous cohorts through transformation from brigades. Once the brigade program was sunset, which I think I will mention at least one more time in this episode, we said, well, we can still do that, but what about autonomous cohort tessellation? A tessellation is like a mosaic, essentially a discovery platform. First, you can discover how to transform into a autonomous cohort, but a discovery platform in the tessellation version for organizations, cohorts that are pursuing activities, I guess you could say, developing open source, civic volunteer, or well, it could be anything. There's nothing really tying into civic volunteerism, but that's where it's getting started. So connect make organizations, cohorts discoverable, cohorts of one or more people, and of course their initiatives and projects and whatnot. And then connect, collaborate, communicate. Those are the 3 C's of Project Act. So you can visit that webpage. I am going to endeavor to work on this page today. So hopefully if you do visit this page on March 4th or maybe for March 5th, 2025, it will look nicer than it does before that. But I have 2 to get to. The next one, agileforvolunteers.org. Agile, A-G-I-L-E, F-O-R, volunteers, V-O-L-U-N-T-E-E-R-S, period, O-R-G. Agile for Volunteers is a reimagining of the original Back to Basics 2001, February 2001, Agile that was developed by and for programmers or software engineers or developers. We are taking those first principles where we've ditched the Agile industrial complex, so stand-up meetings and a reporting structure to management and so on, very loose, and we're gearing it towards volunteers rather than full-time employees, which really is what Agile is for. And then in addition to that, not only software development. So volunteers, when you're working on civic volunteer projects for community elevation, innovation can take many forms. That's one of the reasons we renamed from Code for Vegas to Innovate for Vegas. So Agile for Volunteers is our take, if you like, on how to coordinate and make the most of volunteer time, effort, and expertise, which should be treated like gold. And that as well will help to be a part of our overall policy of attribution. So we can keep track of who is able to do what and who does what and who was there for the project and the initiative overall. Then we can give people credit more easily and make sure that nobody feels as though they did a lot of work and then their name doesn't appear on anything. And that has been the case with some other civic volunteer efforts. So we are avoiding that, and Agile for Volunteers is a part of that. It's a part of the celebration and recognition, but as well making the most of coordinating civic volunteer time, effort, expertise. Quite a mouthful, I know. Finally, mastodon.vegas, mastodon.vegas. We have the name. We have not yet deployed our ActivityPub social media server. That is, it's on the to-do list, but it's not high on the to-do list. It's part of an overall plan that we need to hash out. Not the least of which is moderation. It's kind of a can of worms whenever you're going to host a platform that can enable user-generated content, UGC. So we want to make sure we get that right and see who wants to take that on, I suppose. Kind of shepherd that from launch to some sort of a stable presentation to the world. I would hope that Mastodon.Vegas will get some attention. Vegas does receive some 40 million visitors each year. Hopefully they'll check out that social media presence, which will be a part of our nonprofit public charity offerings. Maybe it'll even drive some donations. Who knows? It will not be hiding behind a paywall, so the donations will be decoupled. I think that's a decision that we'll have to work through. So we have to, and we will. Civics, in case you're curious, Civics has a Wikipedia page. As with everything Wikipedia, it's a good place to start, but not the best place to end your research for knowledge. Civics is based on the Latin word civicus. Did I get that right? Going through by memory. I'll tell you if I was right, because I didn't have the tab open. There we go. Yes, civicus, C-I-V-I-C-U-S. It means relating to a citizen. So everybody, citizens in a society, that's where we are. So you can check out that page. And then finally, Recoding America. It's a book. There's a website for it, recodingamerica.us. So Recoding America, no spaces, no other punctuation. Recodingamerica.us. I think the actual title has the RE in square brackets, but website, straight text. Recoding America is a book written by Jennifer Palka. She was the original founder of Code for America. The book, in my opinion, does not offer any sort of notions or suggestions about Recoding America. What it does do is kind of describe a picture why one might want to consider Recoding America. So it takes a look at the procurement requirements, I guess you could say, the entire platform of the federal government here in the United States, and to some extent many state governments. They outsource, they procure. So there are third-party commercial entities or other agencies, or however it's a complicated. I think in the programming world we would call it a ball of mud. Like, oh, what is going on in there? Like, who even wants to try to figure out what's going on in there? So it's an anecdotal accounting, but if you are interested in some of the things that are being uncovered and whether they're actually true, honest uncoverings in the federal bureaucracy today, as I'm speaking on March 4th, 2025, it's an interesting book. I would recommend it, although it's not going to give you much direction. It's only going to tell you like fire or a bridge out ahead or something like this. It doesn't say, here's how you're going to cross without a bridge. It just says, the bridge is out and maybe here's some reasons why, and good luck. So if you are curious or interested about the history of Code for America, civic volunteerism at scale, you can check that out. So there you go. Let's get started with the episode. Top down, speaking of Code for America. I've spoken about this before regarding top-down approaches to managing or even accomplishing anything. The larger the undertaking becomes, the more difficult it is to satisfy all parts of the overall organization, the effort or collection of efforts, and the ultimate customer or user. Often that is us, we the people, if you like. So when you have top-down management at a large scale, it's really difficult to get feedback or get some sort of indication of what you're doing is working. And this is where you can get some waste, certainly, the loss of efficiencies because of communication or lack of, and so on. So it's an interesting, call it a methodology, I suppose, scheme in a generic way to operate. And something as large as the federal bureaucracy, which is pretty large, it is what it is, and it does what it does. One of the issues with any organization that is large and top-down, the people close to the action, that's like us at the bottom, nearer to where the needs are, where the outcomes will be felt, are very far away from where the decisions are made and control is exerted. This can be frustrating at best. I don't think anyone has ever run into a situation where they said, wow, I can't believe the federal government just worked, like snapping my fingers, more than once, like more than once in a row. There's always something. There's always a long wait on a phone or having to do business via mail with postmarks and whatnot. And it's a long, protracted process. And that can trickle down into state governments, state agencies, or any regulatory bodies and so on. So it can be frustrating. And rarely do we ever know why. The why question. Why is it like this? Well, because they're trying to prevent something. They're trying to protect people from something else and so on. I'm not saying that's always the case, but sort of peeling back a few layers of the onion, if you will, is helpful to understand some of the reasoning behind. And then, of course, you can add to it the age of programs, the fact that procuring software, tools, new methodologies, modern approaches to things sometimes takes time and so on. I have never worked in a federal bureaucracy, but from what I've been told, what I've heard, what I've read, it's just a slow-moving battleship of a machine. It will definitely get there. It's just going to take a little while, and it probably will need some refueling and some repairs along the way. From our early days back in the summer of 2022 when we were founded, it seems like yesterday sometimes, but not other times. The desire to engage locally, to make an impact locally, was the driving force behind our reboot. And as it turns out, not being a part of Code for America again was a better outcome, and probably better in general for all brigades who have been a part of the sunsetting process. So they're no longer brigades as part of Code for America. That's when you find out what you're really into, what you're really up to, what you want to do, and what you're capable of doing, and who your friends are, you could say. So why is this good? Why was it good? This is my view. Others may disagree. I've not been overly loud about some of the issues I observed with my dealings with Code for America. And again, we were never actually rebooted into Code for America. We never became a brigade again or a formal part of or otherwise entangled with Code for America. So the Code for Vegas Foundation rebooted from Code for Vegas as a standalone nonprofit corporation and then later public charity. So I've not been overly loud about some of the issues I've heard about regarding other, now former, brigade interactions with Code for America around the country. But I will say top-down continues to be a bad option for volunteer organization. I just think for a large organization, now if it's a local organization, if it's 10, 100 people total, and they're all reasonably close together, or they have a sort of a personal connection, they can interact as subgroups, or they can visit each other, they can converge on a problem in person, or they can interact with the people in their communities and so on. That sort of top-down at that sort of scale is a different conversation. It's a different comparison. But if you're trying to run a top-down organization at federal, national, I want to say there were 88 brigades at one point. That I cannot verify that number right now, but it was a lot of brigades, a couple per state in a couple of cases. So different, California had a couple and so on. So it may have been 88, but it was, it was more than two. When you have that many organizations spread across the country, it can be tricky. Not everyone on one side of a country like the United States has any sort of intimate awareness about people on the other side of the country here in the United States. Code for America, by the way, Code for America Labs was a 501c3 California nonprofit. But I will say top-down continues to be a bad option for volunteer organizations, if I may repeat myself. Wait, Code for America was staffed with paid employees, not a volunteer organization. Well, that's correct. It was a 501c3 public charity, but it was a corporation, and you can have employees at a charity. You can pay people. Now, Innovate for Vegas Foundation is 100% volunteer, so I am uncompensated. It certainly makes it easier to not be entangled, no double dealing, no endurements. Keeps it very clean. But paid employees, as part of Code for America, were project managing. They were managing volunteer contributors and their contributions in the brigades in some cases, which can be more problematic. Paid employee giving direction to volunteers, and then not really giving credit to the volunteers. That's not good. So not something we need to get into here, though. It's essentially moot since the Code for America Brigade program is already sunset, but it is something to consider moving forward. Remembering history or repeat it. No, remember history or repeat it. If I could get my own notes out of my mouth. Remember history or repeat it, if I might paraphrase George Santayana. If you've ever heard that quote, those who do not recall the past are condemned to repeat it. I think that's the actual as written. George Santayana, Santayana. I've referred to that quote across at least one or two of my audio programs, so this is... That's George. Those who are interested in pursuing civic volunteer efforts are still doing so, we hope. Certainly, Innovate for Vegas Foundation is still ramping up. We're coming up on 3 years old, so we're still young in the universe of this type of thing. We're establishing our presence in our locality. Certainly, most people in the greater Vegas area of about 2.5 million people in Clark County have no idea what we are, what we're doing, etc. Others across the country may be establishing or reestablishing their cohort presence in their localities. Now we can enjoy all the up and downsides of self-determinism. You get to do what you want to do, say what you want to say. And those are song lyrics, I think. So civics, refer to the Wikipedia page if you like. Beyond the political aspects, which we obviously stay out of given our charity status, so we don't do all the things for candidates and whatnot. Politics is like the negotiation parts or the game. Government is a process, and government has measurable, not always observable elements to it. You can write software, you can develop better documentation, you can develop tools and methods. Government is not politics. They go together like, I don't even want to say, but the government side is interesting because that's sort of the underpinnings of society or vice versa. So civics is for us. Politics is for somebody else, but civics is for us, those who conduct our daily lives within our society. Government is part of it, or maybe society is part of government, but I think it's government is part of society. And so we participate in elections, maybe. We could build tools to help people locate election resources like polling places and so on. That's not a political endeavor. Perhaps our city council and county commission activities so we can keep track of those and publicize them or enable people to interact with them. So these are not political undertakings, they're participation in community. But we can and should also be aware of the happenings right around us in our neighborhood and areas near and not quite as near. So this is information awareness, information sharing. So this is where our My Muni and for visitors to the Vegas area, which we have several, the welcome initiatives fit together nicely. Open data capture for collecting open data and publishing it, et cetera, et cetera. So all of our initiatives so far are geared towards community elevation, of course, which is part of our basic purpose. Nothing overtly political, obviously, but certainly something government-ish, especially if we as I intimated, if we do things around election resources, engagement resources for our various levels of government and so on. These are not advocacy, but rather information access tools. So along those lines, there are usually 3 scenarios based on my own experiences interacting with local people and government and non-government entities in a few different places. So this is people interacting with the world. When it comes to people, some remain blissfully ignorant. This is not an insult. People often have things to do. You got a lot to do. Our days are rarely getting easier lately. Head down focus on what we can control or try to is often the way to go for many. And so it's not an indictment of anyone. It's just that many people don't try to keep track of the good or the bad or the various bits of chaos and occasional alignment of realities. Some will lament what is done and what is not. Those who can pay attention can find themselves frustrated with the inaction or what they might deem bad action, and certainly of their local, city council, county commission, state governor, different legislative bodies, regulatory agencies that are within their state or county, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And certainly social media has enabled those who wish to express opinions to do so easily. Does this lead to action? Maybe. Sometimes, as with so many things, it depends. If you have enough of a following or an audience and you can assert yourself in a useful way, you may draw attention. I will give one example. It wasn't necessarily social media, although that didn't hurt. It was when the Formula One race construction was taking place for the first annual Formula One race in Las Vegas in November of 2023. There were several small businesses that were negatively impacted by the construction, the deconstruction after the race, during the race. So they made their troubles known in social media. They got local press attention. Eventually a lawsuit was filed and so on. So sometimes shining a light on things takes some effort and some work. Sometimes you can do so effectively by reaching out to people. So when people are aware of what's happening, they may be upset by it. People who do suffer directly are clearly going to take more proactive action. So yeah, it depends. Not everything is as high profile as that race and the construction around it and so on. So it depends. Proactive engagement, speaking of, through anything from community organization to engaging government entities and agencies. So like city staff, county staff, etc. So your elected officials or the staffers, legislative, all that. There's a whole bunch of layers to actually participating in a political process, all the way to running for office, if you like, or you could be a staffer. So blissfully ignorant, watching but frustrated, or sometimes not frustrated. Sometimes everything's fine, and actually becoming involved. That could also include things like attending city council or county commission meetings, participating in any sort of advocacy, presenting, making public statements at these meetings, which I think you're allowed to do in most places, and so on. So it's actually pro-action. It's actually showing up and being a part of it. As the Latin word civicus suggests, all things related to being a citizen, a part of the society in which we live, at least aware and in some cases involved in what is happening, so that it is not merely happening to us. Okay, that's probably leaning close enough to being political that we can now lean back, maybe. So what about getting civical? Olivia Newton-John, you look it up. As some might be learning through various news reports, there have been substantial reductions in the roles, the employment roles of civil servants in the federal bureaucracy here in the United States. So these were people paid, but nonetheless interested and engaged in enabling. These are people with experience and dedication, taking active roles in the way our society functions, making it go. Always ideal and perfect? No, not necessarily. But these are a cadre of people who were involved as their daily job. That was what they were doing, was being a part of this machinery, keeping it moving. For some, this has come to an end. Wish I could avoid all typos. To an end. Had an extra D in there. Or may yet come to an end. We're not sure. It's not really clear at any given time. Making for interesting times, not only for those impacted directly. So if you have been laid off and you were working for a federal government agency or similar, that is annoying. And that is a drastic understatement. It can be frustrating, angering, sometimes dangerous, depending on your situation or what you were working on, what you were actually responsible for. Or it could be something that will be felt by countless others who benefited from the work that these people were doing and the programs and agencies that they enabled, which may be completely gone or which may be degraded in performance with a reduction in force, the RIF. So it's hard to say. For the rest of us, though, understanding the scope and grandeur of various parts of the bureaucracy, especially at the federal level, which is large, as it is or was, is a substantial undertaking. Just knowing what you don't know. I don't want to start quoting Donald Rumsfeld again, but knowing what you don't know is a full-time job. This is why we have been aiming much more squarely at thinking and acting locally with Innovate for Vegas Foundation. So we are not looking at national projects. We're not looking at working with federal agencies. That might be problematic now anyway. So we're thinking local. We're trying to develop local initiatives so that we can speak directly to the people that they would have impact on, hopefully positive. This is no less important if we consider a bottom-up approach to civic participation. We can focus, think, and act local, and effects can trickle up instead of down. Now, what I mean by that, if Innovate for Vegas comes up with something that seems to work, whatever it is, maybe some other locality, some other cohort of civic volunteers or others that are trying to elevate their communities will have a similar challenge they're trying to tackle, and they may say, oh, what did you guys do? Oh, that's interesting. Maybe we can learn from that. To which we would say, that's the beauty of open source projects like this. You can take from what you will, give people credit. To coin a phrase from one of my former employers, Philips Electronics, let's make things better. One nice feature of staying local, we can interact directly with our fellow locals, and perhaps they might join in or support such efforts in one way or another. We, and that might include you, will it, can talk to people and ideate. We can look at areas that might benefit from some local innovation and implement to close gaps, solve problems, and elevate communities, small and large. So this is the idea, to enable and encourage ideation, innovation, and implementation to make our communities better. Rolls right off the tongue. Of course, people have to participate in doing that. And part of what we're trying to accomplish is because innovation culture of innovation in the greater Vegas area is in need of some cultivation. And because we do have so many people that visit the Vegas area, allegedly 40 million every year, we've sort of opened our virtual welcome mat. How does that work? We've opened our doors. We've extended a warm welcome to people in other localities who would like to collaborate on our initiatives to be a part of these deployments that will hopefully have a broad audience so we can try out some ideas on these 40 million people that are visiting from all over. We have a population of about 2.4, 2.5 million in Clark County, where Las Vegas is. And by the way, Las Vegas that you know of is probably not in the city of Las Vegas, but it is in Clark County. But we have 40 million people visiting from who knows where, all over. Who knows where? I'll tell you, the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, which is where I got that number. They're in charge of keeping track of that. So if we can invite others from near and far to ideate, innovate, and implement, if we do it well, we have a large population of people passing through Vegas that can give it a try and then go back home and say, well, that Vegas was a really smart city. Maybe we can do that here. And who knows, maybe some people in their own city or town were contributing to this project. So who can say? I'll tell you, though, you should just do it. With apologies to a certain sneaker company, trainers, if you like. just an opinion, which happens to align with what we are trying to accomplish, but becoming more aware of what is happening here locally is a good thing. Knowing is half the battle, as they say. An awareness of how systems work, how agencies and infrastructure function, and understanding what people are doing in government, your elected officials, and with government and non-governmental agencies like staffers and employees and so on, will make you a more informed civilian on the ground in your communities. I always tell this story. I took a class when I was living in Sunnyvale, California. I took a class to be a part of SNAP. I took several classes, actually. Sunnyvale Neighbors Actively Prepared. It's essentially a city-run equivalent to CERT, which is the Community Emergency Response Team, I think it is, CERT, which is part of FEMA. So civilian first response. People in your neighborhood are trained what to do in the case of an earthquake or catastrophe. So SNAP was similar, except run by the city. So, and part of that and my pursuits of the Leadership Sunnyvale program, I was already quite familiar with how our community services were functioning, especially DPS, so Fire Department, Department of Public Safety. So between Leadership Sunnyvale, where I understood how the city was functioning, and SNAP, where we learned how actual emergency response took place in case of a fire, et cetera, et cetera. Fun fact, we had an earthquake during the first class. That was fun. But when I had my own house fire, hopefully not related in any way to this training, I was completely prepared and completely aware of what to expect, what was going to happen, where the fire station was, actually quite close to where I was living. All of the steps, all of the expectations, all of the, the good news and the bad news. We already knew this. So the more informed you are, the more aware you will be when you need to be aware. Hopefully you don't have a house fire, but it's good to know what happens and when it's supposed to happen and so on. And by the way, I'll just inject this. When you are in a crisis situation, CERT, which is part of FEMA, or a program like SNAP, they tell you this: you should be ready to help your community, help your neighbors, be able to look after yourself for as long as 4 days after a crisis. Why is that? Because if you are not the worst hit area, you might have to wait for the resources that are being directed at the worst hit area or areas. So sometimes you have to wait, and that's just because that's how the world works. So these are the sorts of things that when you understand them, you don't get surprised by things like, how come it's taking more than 1 day? Right. So this is awareness and understanding. And so making information available to people in a locality, like, hey, here's what's going to happen if this other thing happens. Making those pieces of information and resources available is part of what a civic volunteer organization could be doing, building those resources. My Muni, for example. Obviously, we would love to invite more people to be aware of what we are up to. That's a good start. Whether that includes participating in our initiatives, telling others about what we're aiming to accomplish, maybe be our marketing team if you like, or maybe joining in the effort financially. Our expenses are very low, so we really haven't been pressing that. Joining in on other efforts, maybe near, maybe far. And if there is not already a cohort of people tackling something you want to be a part of, maybe there's something in your neighborhood or in your community, in your part of a city, or maybe citywide or even larger. It's just something that you feel needs to be addressed or fixed or elevated, and no one's doing it. Consider starting your own effort, cohort, nonprofit. There's no better way to understand the society around you than becoming involved in elevating it. And that's part of the reason we are doing what we're doing and why we invite people to be a part of what we're doing or to be engaged and supportive in what they're doing. So that's the quick rundown on getting civical. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's okay, but you can just look up Olivia Newton-John and you'll go, oh, okay. There's probably a music video for it. In fact, I'm pretty sure there is. So do consider becoming involved in your society around you, your neighborhoods. I'm not saying you got to go knock on your neighbor's door, but just becoming aware of resources that are available to you, information resources to start with, probably published online somewhere, knowing how things function, knowing what happens when certain things stop functioning, emergency services, crisis awareness, crisis aversion, crisis services in general. Pardon me. What happens? Nevada has southern Nevada in particular, has a large number of fault lines, which nobody really knows about because they don't talk about it. They think California has earthquakes, but Nevada has plenty of fault lines. There could be an earthquake. There could be fires. We're already always in a drought, so there's always the possibility of fire. There's a possibility of who knows what coming to town as far as virus, bacteria. A lot of people moving in and out of the greater Vegas area could be coming to Vegas and leaving something behind, or bringing something to Vegas and sharing it with someone else, going somewhere else. So they make a point of saying during CERT training here that public health is possibly a crisis scenario that they have to be able to deal with. And the list goes on. So Vegas is an interesting place, and because of the volume of people who pass through here, it's an interesting opportunity, allegedly, to share new ideas with people from different cultures, speaking different languages, with different backgrounds, from different localities, and just see what they think. And then again, maybe take it home and say, boy, I wish we could be such an amazing, awesome, smart city like Las Vegas. And then we will ask them. No, I'll leave it there. Thank you for visiting this week's episode of Let's Innovate for Vegas, the audio program created exclusively by the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, by yours truly, Managing Director Dan Hugo, and created for the world. Las Vegas is much bigger than you think. Take care. Thanks for listening. Catch you next time.